What's good, homies? Welcome back to the Drafts and Draughts podcast. I'm Joe, aka Sultan. It's Monday, February 3rd, and today is my mom's birthday. So happy birthday, Mom. Thanks for being our number one fan of the show. Thanks for being our number one subscriber. Favorite mom I've ever had. Today, we're going to be taking you through a sneak preview of my 2025 rookie rankings for our upcoming rookie drafts. It's going to be based on one quarterback rankings. But before we get into it, I wanted to remind you guys that we finally launched our official Discord channel called the Draft House, spelled Haus. It's brand new as of last week or a couple weeks ago. I'll have the link to it in the description of the show on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you're listening. And on all of our socials, you'll be able to get to it through our link tree. You also might be able to just search for the Draft House on Discord and find us, DRAFTHAUS. You might have to have the link to actually join, but keep in mind it's a work in progress. It's our first attempt at making a channel and trying to build a little community where other degenerates like me and Dave can get together and talk Dynasty or redraft or trade questions or find new leagues, make new friends, ask for unbiased opinions. And yeah, it's a place where you can, connect with, me and Dave and some of our friends who have already joined. And right now, it's not that many people in there, but I'm hoping it'll start to build up over time. And who knows, maybe it'll take off and we can even do listener leagues at some point. But yeah, no draft review today. I want to just dive right into it. No OTQ today. Let's get on to what the guts of the episode is going to be about, and that's the rookie draft. And in order to talk about the rookie draft, we got to talk about what the offseason cadence and flow tends to be like for both the NFL and Dynasty. So this time of year, we're all getting ready for the Super Bowl, the Eagles versus Chiefs. We've heard this story before. We've read this book. We've seen this movie. We know it's a train wreck. None of us want to watch it. I mean, we do want to watch, but we're going to be mad no matter who wins. But yeah, so over the next week, you'll have the Super Bowl will come to an end. The Senior Bowl just happened. As far as rookie prospects go, the Senior Bowl just happened this past weekend. Some players stood out, had great showings at the practices all week, had great showings in the game. Some players were told they did so well during practice, they don't even need to play. And some of them were told long ago they don't even need to show up. And why is that important? It means that those players most likely have been told they're going to be taken with a team's first or second pick, meaning they don't need to showcase much at the Senior Bowl in order to solidify a spot in the draft. So that's really good for guys like the obvious ones you've probably all heard of, like Ashton Genty and Caleb Johnson and Amarian Hampton, who weren't there. And then some of the receivers who were fringe bubble guys like, Matthew Golden wasn't there and Elick Ayomanor wasn't there. Trying to think of who else didn't play in the Senior Bowl. A few other guys that, we thought might show up at the Senior Bowl ended up not going. So I think that bodes well for their potential draft capital. But yeah, as far as the offseason flow, the following 2025 NFL season should open in around mid-March, and that's when free agency will start up. Then the combine happens, I think, the first weekend in April. Sometime in there's the combine where you fill out a lot of the underlying metrics you really need to complete all of your rookie draft evals, which is why my rankings today are going to be an incomplete list because I still need official heights and weights for a lot of the running backs and wide receivers and tight ends because those are weighted heavily in my evaluation process. Because for running backs, BMI, which is your body mass index, I think that's what it stands for. I actually don't know what that stands for. It's actually a really strongly correlated metric to running back production from a fantasy perspective. You really want to be over 30 is the sweet spot, or at least between 29 and 30 for a BMI. Anything below that, you're going to struggle to see enough volume to be super relevant fantasy wise. You also need speed scores are super important, which is some sort of calculated product of your BMI and your 40 time. So that heavier running backs that run a heavier running back that runs a 4.48 could have a better speed score than a lighter framed running back who runs a 4.37. So speed score kind of tries to normalize speed for your every running back's mass, and I use that a lot when I'm looking at, especially for tiebreakers. For wide receivers, actually, believe it or not, height and weight is actually the strongest correlated combine metric for wide receivers to fantasy production. But I also like seeing 3-cone drill. I think the agility factor that a wide receiver can showcase at the combine is super important. And then for tight ends, it's very important. The combine is very important for tight ends because you get their true height and weight, because there's I don't know why, but there's a height weight bench hurdle that most of the time you want your tight ends to clear to become fantasy relevant. I think that's like, you want them to be like 6'4" or taller and 240 or heavier. I think you have a few anomalies, like pretty sure Brock Bowers is smaller than that. And that's he's the anomaly, not the rule. So I'm not saying it's the end all be all benchmark, but it will be important to see some of these fringe guys like Harold Fannin Jr., who's see here, I have him listed at 6'3", 238, or I think he's the only fringe one. I don't know what that new guy who showed out at the Senior Bowl. His name was Elijah Arroyo, tight end out of Miami. I don't know his height and weight. I don't even have him in my little side database here, but that happens in early April. Then the NFL draft happens the end of April, and then it's rookie draft season. And the NFL draft is also important because that's a big factor in my evaluation process, because there are certain, like it or not, you wouldn't think that just because a player got drafted in a certain spot means makes him a better producer. Like if Bijan got drafted 8th overall, 28th, or 108th, he's still Bijan, right? But something to do with the correlation between draft position and fantasy production is also pretty strong. So seeing where players are drafted goes a long way. And as I'll mention later, if certain players get drafted in the early first round or mid first round, I might move them up in my tiers. Another unique thing that I'm going to be doing with my rankings is I'm not just going to be giving you straight up my 2025 rankings, because I think it's misleading to say this guy is who I would take at the 103, because not all 103s are created equally. So what I have here is I already preloaded a tier maker with the 2023, 2024, and 2025 rookie players. I mean, not all of them, like the top 15 or so of every class. And then I already pre-tiered them where, according to my previous rankings, the quality of each of those prospects and what tiers they would slide into. And I'm going to use that to try to benchmark the 2025 class against prior classes. So you can kind of say, oh, I might have this player who's the 106, but he actually would have been the 102 last year. That's how good he is. Or inversely, if I have a guy at 103 this year, he might be the 109 in last year's class, which will say, damn, even though he's the 103, he's really not your traditional 103. Like maybe this prospect who I'm going to get there isn't as good as former 103 prospects. So I think it could be helpful. I thought it would be a cool idea, because for me, I like seeing that. Like, for reference, Lance Zierlein just dropped his prospect grades today. And I like to think he's a pretty reputable film scouter, prospect grader. And then you see in order, his running backs are, I have it open somewhere. Where is this? So in order, his wide receivers are like Luther Burden, Matthew Golden, Tet McMillan, Emeka Egbuka, and Trey Harris. And it's like, okay, that's great. So this player is the wide receiver one of his class. If he were to go one-on-one, does that mean he's equal to Marvin Harrison? Well, or Malik Neighbors or Jackson Smith and Jigba, who are the last few classes top wide receivers? And the answer is, why is my computer doing this? Well, you can go back and look at Lance's prior class grades by position and start to compare them across classes and say, oh, he had this player at a 6.7, but my fucking computer. But this player was a 6.9 last year. So I'm actually going to say, even though Luther Burden is his number one, he actually would have profiled more like the wide receiver 4 of last year's class or something like that. And I think it's helpful to see. Maybe I'm convoluting it and making it tougher on you guys. I don't know. But without further ado, let me share my tier list. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to read off for you guys who are listening at home who I already have in each tier so you can get a better idea of what the tier qualities are before I start actually slotting in some of the 2025 rookies. So the 4 tiers I have are listed here is S tier, which is legendary, which is like blue chip prospect. I think would have been a franchise, dynasty fantasy franchise altering level prospect at the time. Keep in mind, these are my prospect grades as they stand as prospects, not how they've done since they joined the league. The next tier I have is A for elite prospects. Could be the 101 in other classes, but maybe they're just not the 101 because there's legendary players in their class. The next tier I have is B, which I have labeled as a mid-first quality prospect. And the 4th tier is C, which is late first quality prospects. So my only 3 players currently in my S tier, my legendary tier, is Marvin Harrison Jr., Bijan Robinson, and Malik Neighbors. I have, I don't think I could really differentiate any of them, except I think I enjoy wide receiver evaluations better than running back ones. I think wide receivers have more data that you can look at. So that's why I think I would have probably rank them in order would be Marv, Neighbors, Bijan. But they're all, keep in mind, as I always say, when I have players in the same tier, it's an STP type thing, same tier preference. If you want to move a certain player ahead of another guy in the same tier, I'm not going to argue with it. I think all these guys are the same quality level of prospects. They are the 101s of their classes. Probably could be the 101 of just about any class because that's how good the prospects they are. The next tier I have is called my elite tier. And I also only have 3 players in this tier, and it's Rome Odunze from the 2024 class, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Jackson Smith and Jigba from the 2023 class. And I think I liked Rome a little better than Gibbs and JSN at the time as far as prospect quality goes. The next tier I have here is mid first. And I have 7 players in this tier. So I have Brian Thomas Jr. from the 2024 class, Jordan Addison from the 23 class, Zay Flowers from the 23 class, Devon Achane from the 23 class, Jonathan Brooks from the 24 class, Ladd McConkey from the 24 class, and Brock Bowers from the 24 class. And yes, this is not me retroactively changing my rankings. I did have Brian Thomas Jr. as my 104, as the wide receiver 4, and closer to Odunze than others had. I'm very proud of that. I did also have Jonathan Brooks and Ladd McConkey ahead of Brock Bowers, and consensus really had Brock Bowers around that 104, 105 range. So for 1 QB. And then the last tier I have here is the rest of your late first caliber quality prospects, which I have in no particular, honestly, no real order here. I guess kind of it is a little bit of an order, but I have Quentin Johnson from 2023, Dalton Kincaid in 23, Xavier Worthy from 2024, Zach Charbonnet from the 2023 class, Michael Mayer from 23 class, Trey Benson from 24 class, Condre Miller from the 23 class, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Josh Downs, Keon Coleman, Anthony Richardson, and CJ Stroud. As you can see, this is where all of my QBs slot in. I don't think I'll ever recommend taking a QB with an early first or even a mid first. And that's why I have Brock Bowers down the board, is I just don't think tight end really adds that much value in a 1 quarterback format. It's just like, I don't think QB does either. So I would be reluctant to put them any higher than B tier, although it looks like obviously now you can make the case that Bowers belongs further up. But hold on, let me update a note. With that being said, let's get into the rookie draft rankings. So starting with the S tier, as of right now, I have 0 players in this legendary tier. I don't think there's anybody in this 2025 class that comes close to the level of insulated value and production that I think Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Bijan Robinson had. And that's not to say that some players can't get there, but I think the hype that was around Marv and Bijan and even Neighbors by the end of his rookie campaign was so astronomical that you could have traded them almost 1-for-1 for your Brees Hall or even CD Lamb or Justin Jefferson. And if not 1-for-1, very close to 1-for-1 during their 101 drafts. And I don't think anyone in this class right now holds a candle to those 3 as far as hype goes and that ensuing value insulation that affords. That being said, if Ashton Genty gets a top 15 draft pick on draft day, I think we'll move him up into the S legendary tier. It depends on what team he goes to, situation, how his combine goes. There's so much more that has to be unraveled with him because it's so hard for me to judge. But my first pick, and he slots into the A tier, is Ashton Genty, and I'd have him at the top of the A tier. I think it's hard because I think I'd have him behind Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Gibbs was an awesome prospect. Him going 12th overall to the Lions with his pass catching skill set and the way he performed at the combine all but solidified him as, if not legendary, very close to it for me. And so for Ashton Genty, I think it's hard for me to evaluate him being from the Midwest Conference because when you look at the history of Midwest running backs, you see a litany of players who smashed that conference and then went on to do virtually nothing in the NFL. I should have probably pulled that list up, but I think I remember Thomas Rawls, I think, was somebody that did that. Maybe I'll look that up right now. Let's see. Rushing yards leader from Midwest Conference. We have Rashad Penny, Jay Ajayi. I mean, Ashton Genty's up there already. Yeah, there's just nobody. I'll read the names for you. And this is recent. Donald Pumphrey, Dontrell Moore, Ashton Genty, Brian Hill, Charles Williams, Toa Tawa'au, Jay Ajayi, Tim Cornette, Rashad Penny, George Holani, Asher Clark, Rodney Ferguson. You tell me how many of those names you recognize. How many fantastic running backs from the Midwestern Conference go on to become superstars in the NFL? That just gives me some pause. Now, that being said, Ashton Genty has a 98 PFF grade, which is the highest in the last 3 classes combined. He's at 5'9", 215. He has a 31.7 BMI, which is amazing. Like I mentioned before, you want to be over 30. He's built like a bowling ball. I think his best comparable player would be somebody like a Marshawn Lloyd type because what his claim to fame is his tackle breaking ability. Now that's, again, it's tough for me to evaluate that when he's running against Midwestern Conference. It's like he's running against, future construction workers. No wonder he's breaking all the tackles. So I have Ashton Genty there for now. I think if he gets a top 15 pick, I don't even know if I still don't think I'll move him up to S legendary, but he is my 101 of the class. So the next player I have on this list here is Tet McMillan. Let's just call him that. He's a wide receiver out of Arizona. I don't know where his face is on this database. There he is. And I think I'd have him. Oh, I meant to mention that it's for Ashton Genty. It's important to note that he has a 7.1 Lance Zierlein grade, 7.15 Lance Zierlein grade, which is the highest in this class by a wide margin and higher than any running back in the last 3 classes. It's the highest last year was Jonathan Brooks, who got a 6.38, and the highest in the 2023 class was Bijan, who had a 6.84. So for Ashton Genty to get a 7.15, it's hard for me to argue with the fact that he could in fact be legendary. I'm willing to be wrong, and I'm willing to move him up if he gets the capital necessary. And I'm okay with it. I'm just pausing a little bit around Genty and the hype because I don't think the hype doesn't make sense for him right now for me. Anyways, the next one I have here was Ted McMillan. I also have him in my A tier. Uh, he is the only player I had heard of in this class, or him and Luther Burden are the only two players that I've heard of consistently over the last 3 years that also maintained their hype. I think there were some other guys. Can't even remember who they are, but I think Evan Stewart was one who I think I remember hearing about a couple years ago. Wasn't he like Ohio State or maybe Alabama a few years ago? Isaiah Bond was another one. I think he was at Alabama and transferred to Texas. And they've both kind of fallen off the radar, whereas Tet has stayed near the top for quite a while. And what I think I want to do here is I want to show some of his player comps. So I'm going to switch my shared screen. There should be way easier ways to do this, but in my wide receiver database, I put together a prospect database so you can compare prospect profiles. And what I did here was I actually put together Tet McMillan's best comps based on his final year of college's PFF receiving grade, his adjusted yak, yards per route run, target per route run, first down per route run, and his wide rate, which is just how often you line up out wide. I only use that column to get kind of an archetype level comparison. And when I filtered for those who most look like Tet McMillan's efficiency profile, you get an interesting list of players. I gave him top 10 draft capital because that's where he's being mocked most often. So that narrowed down some of the comparables as well. But from top to bottom, his most comparable players are Rashee Rice, Jordan Addison, Jahan Dotson, Laviska Shenault, DJ Moore, and Tet McMillan. Now, that's a pretty decent list. Like nobody there is a legendary Hall of Famer, but they're all pretty solid NFL producers, except for Shenault and to a lesser, Dotson has done at least something, not much, but he's done something. It's important to note that Tet's lined up out wide 91% of the time versus everybody else on this list is around 75 to 80%. So it's not a perfect one-to-one match, but these are the types of wide receivers that you could see him comparing to. And I think when you look at Tet on paper, he's 6'5", 2 something. I don't remember exactly what his specs are, but he's big enough to the point where you say he looks a lot like Drake London meets Nico Collins in some sort of. He's big. He's got a huge catch radius. He's somewhat fast, but he's not a burner. But I think he's probably faster than Drake London. But he's maybe not as tough as Drake London. He also didn't play. Actually, they did play in the same conference in the Pac-12. So good, decent level of competition. So I like Tet. He's my 102 right now. He'll be landing spot dependent with the next guy as far as if I think he could move down. But for right now, I think I have a clear tier break for my rookie tiers is Genty and McMillan are my 1 and 2, and then we move on to the next tier, which my 103 so far is Travis Hunter. And he's a unique one because it's tough to really make sense of his underlying stats. I think as a prospect, I have him better than everybody that's currently in this tier, except maybe Brian Thomas. I think he was such a clean. Oh, I got to switch back. Sorry, guys. Present, share screen, back to my tier list. So I put Travis Hunter right here. I put him second in the tier. I put Brian Thomas ahead of him. Maybe that's me playing some hindsight recency bias with Brian Thomas's most recent fantastic season, but I put Travis Hunter here, and it's really going to come down to he's the toughest prospect to analyze right now because you don't know what he's going to do at the next level. I know that there's a lot of speculation that says he's probably going to be a corner first and foremost as his primary, and then he might get some packages on offense too. But he's a absolute freak of an athlete. You go watch highlights of him, and he looks smooth. He can catch. He's a contested catch beast, especially around the goal line. I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong here, but he reminds me so much of Garrett Wilson when he has the ball in his hands. And I'm like, if this guy lands in a situation where he can walk in and be an alpha wide receiver 1, and he decides, hey, wide receivers get paid the most money in the NFL. Why the fuck am I going to spend all my time being a cornerback when I can make the big bucks, be the face of a franchise, face of the league at some point, a superstar wide receiver, two-way player, the Shohei Ohtani of the NFL. Until I'm told otherwise, I'm going to have him at my 103. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to take him there. Like, to be honest, I'd be really nervous to do it. But right now, that's where I have him. And until we hear otherwise, I'm going to leave him there just because I think it's such a good prospect that he's worth looking at. The next one I have on this list is Luther Burden. And I'd say he's probably grades out behind Addison and Flowers, probably behind Achane, Brooks. I'd probably put him near the bottom of this tier. No, I'll put him ahead of. He's a better prospect than Brooks was, but not as good as Ladd. I don't know why I had Ladd behind Jonathan Brooks last year in my rankings. It looks stupid now. Probably because I just felt like because by virtue of Jonathan Brooks being the only running back in the class, pushed him up. Like the only running back to really like last year, pushed him up the prospect ranking. So Luther Burden is my 104. I actually had him further down this list a little bit, but then the Lance Zierlein grades came out today, and he was the wide receiver one of the class at 6.71. Take that with a grain of salt because I'm pretty sure Jalen Hyatt was Lance Zierlein's wide receiver one of the 2023 class, and he had like a 6.6 grade. So I don't know what to make of it, but usually Lance is pretty accurate with his grading system. And I again put together a list of comps similar to Luther Burden, same way that I did for Tet McMillan. And here is Luther Burden's comps, his best comparables. And so, again, normalized for all those categories. He had an 80 PFF receiving grade and a 5.5 adjusted YAC, 2.32 yards per out run. A 14% first down per out run is good. Lined up out wide 73% of the time. I watched some of the highlights. He looks like a stockier slot guy, or not a slot guy, but he looks like he's built like a slot guy, but he's lines up somewhat out wide, but he looks stocky I don't know. It's hard to make sense. He's 5'11", 208. He's only 21 years old, so he's on the younger side of this prospect group. And when I sorted for his best comparables, though, it's not the most spectacular list. His most comparable players are Chase Claypool, Jordan Addison, Laviska Shenault, Dante Pettis, DJ Moore, and Luther Burden. A lot of actually the same guys that we had for the Tet McMillan's comparables. I think he's also going to be draft capital and landing spot dependent for me because right now I have him as my 104. And if he goes in the mid to late first in a good location, I think he'll probably stay here. If he ends up on a team that already like a crowded wide receiver room where his best case scenario is fighting for the wide receiver 2 role, I don't think this will happen. But say he went to like the Vikings or the Chiefs, I don't think that would be a good landing spot for him. I think it would be one of those things where we're like, okay, it's a murky situation. I don't know if I love it. Same if he went to like the Green Bay Packers where they have a bunch of different wide receivers. I feel like Luther Burden is a unique situation for me because normally wide receivers under 6 feet tall, I look as more of like gadget-y guys unless they have some sort of game-breaking ability, like some crazy tackle-breaking ability or some crazy speed or crazy agility like Tank Dell or Tyreek Hill. Excuse me. So that's where I have Luther Burden right now. He was a guy who 2 years ago was regarded as the wide receiver one of the class, him or Tet McMillan. And it's good to see that it's kind of held true so far. But yeah, let me stop screen sharing that. We're going to go back to tier maker. The next one I have here is my 105. I have Omarion Hampton. And I think he's so much better of a prospect than Jonathan Brooks. Like, in case you didn't realize it, this class is a very good running back class. And there's like 7 running backs who are better than the running back 1 of last year's class. But that being said, Omarion Hampton, he is, how old is he? Let's see here. He's 21 years old. He'll be 22 at the start of the season. Had an 89 PFF rushing grade. He's 6 feet 220, so his BMI comes in at 29.8, which is just below that threshold you want, but still in that good zone. The 29 to 30 range is still a lot of running backs are in that good zone. And I love that he's 220. And I watched a bunch of his highlights. He runs tough and he looks fast, which I like. I like when I watch someone's foot tape and I get like I'm happy about it. And Hampton's running style reminded me a lot of Zach Charbonnet. I'm not sure if that's because of the midriff style that he has, where he wears like a cut off, you can like an exposed stomach and lower back, some weird look that I feel like Zach Charbonnet might have had at UCLA. But Omarion Hampton is a guy who I think, he could sneak into the first round of NFL drafts, which is going to prop him up pretty high. If not a top 3 or 4 pick in one quarterback, he'll definitely be a top 6 pick. He's my favorite non-Janty running back right now. I reserve the right to change my opinion on him. I do think he's got a lot going for him. And I think, as with most running backs, if he gets the required draft capital, we're going to be very happy with Omarion Hampton. And the next one I have here is Trevion Henderson. He's like my 2B of the class. I like him almost as much as Hampton. We've known about him for 4 years now. He's a senior at Ohio State. He broke out as a freshman, had a couple down years. This year, he doesn't have the volume to quite justify maybe an early pick, but he certainly has the intangibles and the lore behind him, because everyone's loved Trevion Henderson. If you watch the Ohio State national championship run, he was incredible through the entire playoffs. And the only reason why he has lower volume numbers is because this year Quinshon Judkins transferred into Ohio State from Ole Miss, and they had a shared backfield. And you know what? It worked. It's going to be pretty sad if the NCAA starts going to running back by committee offenses. The NFL's already kind of sapped the fun out of running back rooms because of that over the years, and I'd hate to see it in the college level too. But Trevion Henderson is a guy who I think whoever gets the better landing spot of him and Hampton is going to be my running back too. Or I think Hampton and Henderson are closer to Janty than Gibbs was to Bijan pre-NFL draft. I think Bijan was like head and shoulders the greatest running back prospect we've ever seen besides Saquon. He was just so good at everything. And Gibbs was great, but just Bijan cleared in every way imaginable besides long speed. I think Hampton and Henderson are so different of running backs from Janty, first of all. But I think they're both just as good, or just as good, maybe a stretch. But the only real drawback on Henderson is he's already 22 years old. So not that that's old, but it's not on the young side of prospects, meaning when he gets off his rookie contract, he'll already be 26, 27 years old. So maybe he doesn't get a second lucrative contract like you see guys like Saquon and Jonathan Taylor sign. But he had a 92 PFF grade, which was pretty good in the class. And he has 78 receiving PFF grade among running backs. That was number 1 in the class. So between that, his clear, or maybe not clear, but his seemingly possesses a sub 4.5 40 ability, maybe even sub 4.4. He's 5'10", 212, which means he's already got a 30.4 BMI, which is what you want to see. I think he has the skill set to come in the league, be a bell cow, and he's somebody that I'm excited for on draft day. That's it for my B tier. So again, recapping with the first 6 picks, I have Ashton Genty's 101, 102 is Tet McMillan, 103 is Travis Hunter, number 104 is Luther Burden, 105 is Omarion Hampton, 106 is Trevion Henderson. Moving on to our C tier, we have Quinshon Judkins, and he is one who I think I will have ahead of Zach Charbonnet, and after Xavier, actually, I probably have him right around Xavier Worthy as a prospect and Dalton Kincaid. He might be at the top of this entire tier now I look at it. And this is what I think is going to be the good thing about this class. I think this class lacks a bunch of elite talent, but it has a lot of really good talent. Meaning, I think your 107 to 112s are going to have, there's going to be a bunch of players in that range that all could go 107, and you're going to get some of them at 111, 112, 201. And I think That's where the value in this class is going to come from, because it's got a lot of depth at positions that matter, like running back. But yeah, Quinshon Judkins came onto the scene as a freshman at Ole Miss and dominated the SEC. He was unbelievable, and he was the clear, far and away running back one of this class for 2 years running. Transfers to Ohio State, has a down year, quote unquote, while Genty smashes, Hampton smashes, and people are kind of fading his production now. And I just think, what has he done to prove that he doesn't deserve the accolades or the hype we had about him before? He's only 21 years old. He had an 87 PFF rushing grade this past year. He's also 6 feet 220 like Omarion Hampton, so comes in at 29.8 BMI. What's not to like? Let's see what did Lance Zierlein give him for a running back grade. Lance's running back rankings are Genty 1, Henderson 2, Judkins 3, Hampton 4, and Caleb Johnson 5. So Quinshon Judkins comes in on the Lance Zierlein scale at a 6.33 grade, which would put him still ahead of Jonathan Brooks from last year and ahead of Jalen Wright and Trey Benson. Or no, in line with Jalen Wright and Jonathan Brooks. And compared to 2023, the 6.33 would only be behind Bijan and Gibbs, but he'd be the running back 3 of that class. So I still think Gibbs is a 6.37. So I still think when you're looking at Quinshon Judkins, you can view him as the potential to be an RB1, a bell cow running back. And I think he has a potential to go in the first round of the NFL draft. I wonder if you're going to see, last year's class was a super deep wide receiver class, and this year's class is a super deep running back class. And I think there was some speculation that because the wide receiver class last year was so deep, you might actually see wide receivers fall, because teams would say, why spend the 20th pick on Brian Thomas Jr. when I can get Adonai Mitchell in the second? Why spend the 25th pick on, Xavier Worthy when I can get Xavier Legette in the second round? I think there was some speculation that might happen, and the complete opposite happened. Teams are trading up left and right to go get their guy at the end of the first. We saw Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman, Lab McConkey, Jalen Polk all go within like 10 picks of each other, because teams were saying, there's so many good wide receivers, but I want to go get my guy. And I wonder if we'll see the same thing happen to running backs this year, where everyone thinks maybe running backs will fall because there's so many good ones. What if it's the opposite? What if there's multiple teams trading into the back of the first to go get Quinshon Judkins types, and we see 4 or 5 running backs go in the first round? That could make the value of these picks skyrocket, because first round running backs are like a gold. I don't think there's been a miss in the first round of running backs in the last 5 drafts. I think the closest thing to a miss, and air quotes I say, would be ETN and Najee Harris, who both have given you top 5 running back seasons. So it's really hard to call them a miss outright. But yeah, so Quinshon Judkins is my 105. Moving on to my 106, I have is Emeka Egbuka. And I think he's a guy that he's tough to grade. I think I'd put him as a prospect behind Worthy, but ahead of Charbonnet. He's a guy who's also been around a while. He's a senior at Ohio State, been playing with the likes of Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Garrett Wilson. Actually, I don't know if he played with Wilson. But he's always had an alpha next to him, and he's always been the complementary piece. And I wonder if he's ready to take that step up and become the next big, be the alpha for a team. I think he does a lot of things good. And I pulled together another player comp list for Egbuka, and let me pull that up on the screen for you guys. So Emeka Egbuka's best comparables based on those metrics, same metrics from before, are starting from the top: Justin Jefferson, Tank Dell, Josh Downs, Kadarius Toney, Curtis Samuel, and Malachi Corley. Now, what do they all have in common? The main thing here is Egbuka lined up out wide only 20% of the time. So he's getting compared to the best slot players that college football's had to offer over the last 10 years. And
He had an 80 plus PFF grade. He had a 4.7 adjusted yak, a 2.6 yards per route run is really strong. And looking at this list, he's almost got virtually identical stats to Tank Dell and Kadarius Toney. 11% first downs per route run, 27% target per route run. It just looks like if you could see Ekbuka come on and be that Tank Dell type, maybe this is why Tank Dell and CJ Stroud were so good together, is because Dell reminded Stroud so much of Ekbuka. I think when you watch him play, I think he's been in the league for 4 years. He's produced every single year. Yeah, he's never been the elite producer, but he's been a good player. And I think if he gets first round draft capital to a decent team, you see a situation where you say, I think he could be as good as the wide receiver. He could be as good as Luther Burden. He could be better than Travis Hunter, depending on what Travis Hunter declares to do. He's Lance Zierlein's wide receiver 4 with a 6.35 grade behind Tet McMillan and Matthew Golden, who have 6.4s, and behind Luther Burden, who has got a 6.71. For some context, the 6.35 compared to last year's class would have put him with the likes of Malachi Corley and Troy Franklin and Adonai Mitchell, trailing Neighbors, Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr., and Ladd McConkey. Damn, Lance crushed his last year prospect rankings. Those top 5 are literally the top 5 best players in the class. For wide receivers, I guess I'm missing Xavier Worthy was pretty good, but so not exactly the best outcome for Ekbuka, but the 6.35 would have put him wide receiver, way down the list in 2023. He would have had Hyatt, Flowers, Downs, JSN, QJ, Cedric Tillman, Jordan Addison all ranked ahead of him. So, I don't know. Maybe there's some pause for concern, but I feel like Ohio State is just a factory, and it's hard for me to really fade Ohio State wide receivers because we see so many of them come into the league and either produce right away or become a producer very shortly after their time spent in the league, where you have the likes of Michael Thomas and Terry McLaurin and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Marvin Harrison and Jackson Smith and Jigba. And it's just one hit after another, or very solid player. And I think Ekbuka is just going to be the next one down in the line. Next guy I have here is Tyler Warren. And he looks like he's going to grade out better than Michael Mayer. And he might even be better than Dalton Kincaid. I'm trying to move Dalton Kincaid down. And I think there's a chance I could move Tyler Warren up. But I just don't really care for tight ends ever. Like, I would rather go out and buy the tight end who's already producing in the NFL than try to take a crack on prospect tight ends, because 1, they take too long to develop, and 2, they're such a crapshoot. I feel like your rookie pick is already a crapshoot. Why waste it on a tight end? But if you watch any of the playoff games, he looks awesome. He's huge. He's like 6'6", 250. He's like built above that line that you want from out of a tight end. Yeah, Tyler Warren is 6'6", 261. I don't know how old he is. I couldn't find a birthday, so I'm going to say he's a 5th-year senior, I think. So he's got to be 22, 23, 24, probably 22 and a half. But the important thing here was Lance Zierlein had him graded as a 6.77 tight end, which is better than Brock Bowers was graded on his scale. And Brock Bowers had a 6.71. And the best tight end in the 2023 class was Luke Musgrave at 6.49, and Dalton Kincaid 6.48, Michael Mayer 6.44, Sam Laporta 6.1. Damn, you whiffed on that one. But so this Tyler Warren guy, he's moving up in my internal ranks, but I already put this together before Lance's grades came out, so I didn't move anybody. But Warren has a chance to move up the board the most, I think, on this list. I really like the idea of, if I'm going to get a tight end, I want a freak athlete who's big, fast, and can do everything. And I think because he's got the size, I just need to see him have a decent speed. He had a 93 receiving PFF grade this past year and a 2.81 yards per hour run, which is insanity for a tight end. The only thing that gives me pause is that, why did it take him so long to break out? It's not like Penn State's been a factory for wide receivers over the last 5 years. Like, who have they had? Parker Washington. I can't think of a single other player that's come out of Penn State as Jahan Dotson. So the fact that Tyler Warren hasn't broken out till now does make me pause a little bit. But if the film graders are going to give him that grade, I can't really argue with it. I have him at 109 right now. But yeah, let's move on to the next player I have here. Is Caleb Johnson. And I don't know if I even have a picture of him. Whoops. I don't have a picture of Caleb Johnson. So no picture, but Caleb Johnson is my 110 running back out of, I think, Iowa. And man, I don't know how I feel about him. Caleb Johnson kind of came out of nowhere. Among the running backs that were regarded as being sought after in the 2025 class, we had heard of for years guys like Ollie Gordon and Quinshaw Junkins and Trevion Henderson and even Omarion Hampton a little bit towards the end of last year, and Ashton Janty a little bit towards the end of last year, and Trevor Etienne last year. And, we had guys like Devin Neal and Donovan Edwards, Raheem Sanders. All those guys were like, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen. No one had heard of Caleb Johnson. He comes out this year. He's 21 years old, 6 feet 225, so he's got the prerequisite size. An 87 PFF grade is good. It's not the best in the class. There's like 6 guys over 90, so he's not like it didn't grade out as most outstanding runner. But I watched him run, and I don't see anything that got me excited. It felt like every run was he hands it off and he takes the ball 7 yards and gets tackled and goes down. But 7 yards are like unblocked, untouched. I mean, completely blocked perfectly and untouched. And he runs very upright. He actually looks more slender than he's listed at. And all I can say to describe his running style, and again, this is stylistically, not saying his skill level, but stylistically, he reminded me a lot of Rashad White. That just very upright, vertical runner, almost like longer strides almost, because he doesn't have the fastest feet. Like, your Jahmyr Gibbs looks like fucking Sonic the Hedgehog. It looks like the Roadrunner when his legs start spinning like fucking, I don't even know. You look it up if you want to see what I'm talking about, where his legs start spinning before he starts running. But like Devon Achane's strides look fast. Maybe that's because he's got little legs. But like Caleb Johnson doesn't look like he has the juice, nor does he look like that exciting. And him coming out of nowhere, coupled with all of those facts, just kind of leave me to be, less for me to be desired. And it's nice to see that I was confirmed. My beliefs have been confirmed by Lance Zierlein's grades as well, because he gave him a 6.23 rushing grade, or 6.23 prospect grade, which aligns with, he's a running back 5 of Lance's class. It would have been the running back 4 last year behind Brooks, Wright, and Benson. And that would have been the running back 5 in the 23 class, tied with Achane and Charbonnet behind Izzy Abanikanda, Zach Evans, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Bijan Robinson. So, again, not being in leagues with Achane and Charbonnet are good, and I'm perfectly content with the idea that I probably could be wrong about this. But as of now, Caleb Johnson is my 111. No, my 110. I apologize. And again, he could get first round capital and move up, but for now, I'm comfortable with him there. Next guy I have here is my guy, motherfucking Tez Johnson. I love this dude. I liked him all of last year. I was dying for him to declare last year so I could get him as a sleeper later in drafts. And then he went back to school and he put up another good season. Putting him in my C tier. I'm going to move him probably behind Trey Benson, behind Condre Miller, probably behind Caleb and Jaden Daniels too. Yeah, for now, I'm going to put him between Jaden and Drake May. And Tez Johnson, as you guys all saw, he weighed in at the Senior Bowl at like 5'8", 156 pounds, like something fucking crazy. Like if I sneeze, he's gone. He's fallen over and he might even break a leg, but he balled out. He was uncoverable at one-on-ones. He had a pretty decent actual Senior Bowl. I think he caught a 2-point conversion or something. I don't know. I didn't actually watch it. I didn't watch much of it, but he had a 90 PFF grade, 2.92 yards per route run, 7.6 yak. He had a 91 PFF grade last year, an 86 PFF grade the year before that at Troy. Or no, 91 PFF grade year at Troy, and then an 86 PFF grade with 3.29 yards per route run last year at Oregon. He's been a solid producer, and he's leveled up along the way. He started out at a smaller school like Troy, leveled up to Oregon. I love his story where he was adopted by, or I don't know if adopted is the right term, but lived with Bo Nix. So he's like his brother essentially while they were in college, reunited at Oregon and played together last year. He's an absolute burner. I think he's going to run like a 4.3 flat 40, something like that. I'm just, maybe not, but he's somebody who I'm excited for. I don't think he's ever going to really be a high volume fantasy producer, but why can't he, his ceiling could be Tank Dell and his floor could be, Marcus Valdez-Scantling or Rondale Moore. But I think he has the juice that teams are going to be looking for, and that might even propel him up to a day 2 pick. And if he gets day 2 capital, I think I like, on a team where he can be on the field a lot, I like where he could be. So he's my 111. The last guy I have here is Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. And I don't really have much to say. Again, I'm not a big tight end guy. I think I like him better than Keon Coleman, Anthony Richardson, and CJ Stroud, but I like Josh Downs and Drake May a little better than him. He's also a bigger tight end, and he clearly can do everything. He had a 90 PFF receiving grade, 6'5", 245. He's only 20 years old right now, so he's one of the younger players in this class. And he's a guy that, even though I'm a tight end fader or hater, I think he's the type of guy who I'd be okay spending my 112 on, just like Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer were kind of those guys 2 years ago. That was like, yeah, well, if you're going to use a pick that kind of has like a 25 to 50% hit rate anyways, might as well use it on a guy that also has a 25% hit rate at his position. And I think if you could find a guy that could be a very stable, strong tight end, if he gets first round draft capital, like a lot of, I think Daniel Jeremiah's released his prospect grades for the draft grades and ranked him like the 7th overall player, or maybe that's Dane Brugler. Somebody just released a NFL draft prospect rankings, including like defense, offensive line, everything. And he was the 7th overall player. I think he's just one of the most complete tight ends in the class. Lance gave him a 6.70 grade, which is in line with Brock Bowers. And again, once I see the landing spot, maybe I'll move him up. But again, I think there's a lot of good players ahead of him. So this class is sneaky better than I think we've all been led to believe, but still not nearly as good as last year. I don't think it's as good as the 2023 class at the top because, you look at this list and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 2023 players in the top 3 tiers, and you see like 8 24 players, but you only see 5 from the 2025 class. So it's like the class is lacking the top heaviness that maybe in a shallow league affords you a chance to get your superstar smashers. Again, lot's going to change in the NFL, so I'm not going to say these guys will never do it, but it doesn't have the allure that other classes have had at the top. So what would I be trying to do? Probably trying to trade down from my early picks into mid to late picks and pick up future firsts if possible. If I could trade the 103 for the 109 and a 26 first, I think I'd probably try to do that. It depends on who's there at the 103. It depends on how much I end up liking Luther Burden, Travis Hunter, Marion Hampton, and Trevian Henderson, because maybe one of them emerges as a guy who deserves that 103. And if that's the case, then I'm keeping the 103 and making the pick. I'm not trading for a 109 and a future first or 112 and a future first. But if no one really emerges that I love, then sure, I'll trade down in a tier and pick up the extra capital. So yeah, that's my top 12. The honorable mentions that didn't make I'm not going to go into, but my 201 through 206 are right now, Ollie Gordon, running back out of Oklahoma State, I think. Trevor Etienne, running back who was at Florida, now is at Georgia this past year, brother of Travis Etienne. But completely different running back style. He's more of a short, stocky bruiser, and Travis is more slight of frame, I guess, but has more juice. 203, I have Isaiah Bond, the burner from Texas. 204, I have Matthew Golden. 205, I have Dylan Sampson. And 206, I have Trey Harris. So no quarterbacks in my top 18 for one quarterback rankings. Yeah. I'm glad I got this knocked out. The reason I wanted to get this knocked out is because the next few episodes I'm going to be going through are Dynasty positional rankings with draft picks included. And now that you've seen how I grade out the quality of each pick value, you kind of now will get a better idea when I say, oh, these, I'm going to include picks in my rankings for each position, not the players. I'm not going to throw players in there yet, but I'm going to say Garrett Wilson, Drake London, and the 102 are all in the same tier or something like that, to kind of give you an idea of, okay, if I wanted to make a lateral trade 1-for-1, or make a tier down or a tier up, where could I possibly make some moves with these picks? Just give you, I don't know, give you guys some things to think about. Get everyone's leagues exciting. I know that I only have 2 leagues that are not open right now, my 2 home leagues, and I think we both open our leagues in either mid to late February or early March. I think we'll have an owners meeting in February for both of them, and then we'll open in March. So, but for most of you guys out there, your leagues are probably open, and you probably can start thinking about what your picks are going to be and where you might want to trade. I know Sleeper just imported rookies to the app, so you can start doing mock drafts with rookie players included, with real ADPs now available. And even have pictures already, which is awesome. Granted, they're college pictures, but still better than nothing. So we're coming up on 56 minutes. I had a lot of fun, guys. Thanks. Feel free to, like, subscribe, comment. I love comments, and, join the Discord if you want to come hang out. As always, see you guys in the next one.